Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti. I am MrPhotographer.com. In this video, I'm going to give you a quick start on using Capture One. We're going to take an image that looks like this and make it look like this. Welcome to my first video on Capture One. I've called this video Quick Start because in it I'm going to show you how to quickly begin using Capture One. For some of you, I may be going a little bit too fast and I may be glossing over some of the features that are available in Capture One, but for many of you, what you're going to see in this video is going to be enough to really get you going and using the software. In future videos, I'll drill down and get a little more specific and precise about the different things you could do in Capture One. This is the workspace, and I think as we go along, I'll start introducing different parts of the workspace and what it means. What I want to do right now is get some images to work on. So I figured most folks will be out taking photos and they'll have an SD or memory card full of images. And that's what I have right now. I have a memory card with maybe 14 or 15 images, and I'd like to get those into Capture One to work on. You can see I have Capture One open, and I'm just going to plug my SD card into the computer. So I'm just plugging it in just now, and it's just going to take a second, and you'll see that Capture One recognized that a memory card has been plugged in, and it's asking me to import them. And you can see the import dialog boxes here. And you can see it's from an XT3. I could include subfolders and whatever, but it found the images. There's actually 14 images. Now, where do I want to import them to? Well, I don't want them to stay just on that SD card. I want to put them somewhere inside of my catalog, but I'm going to choose the specific folder. So then you could see that in Mac, the Mac Finder window comes up. If you're using a Windows computer, Windows File Explorer will come up. And I have a number of external hard drives on this computer, so I'm going to put it to this one. And you can see I have a folder Capture One, so I'm going to double click on that. And I want to create a new folder inside of here. You can see I have Fuji photos. I love using Capture One for my Fujifilm RAW files. I think it does a tremendous job. So I have them all kind of segregated right there. But for this video series, I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm just going to call it Capture One Video Series. So any images that I process in this video series, I'll have in this folder. So I'm going to put it right there. So that's where it's going to go. That's going to be my import folder. And you could see there in that path. The collection's going to be when we import things into On One. You have the option of putting them in a specific collection, and by default it's going to be recent imports only. So every new import will clear the collection and put the new images in there, and that's just by default what I'll leave it as. You could back up the images as you import them. I'm not going to do that because I have backup mechanisms in place to back up that hard drive, so I don't need to do that. I could rename them. I'm not going to. I could add metadata. You could see it's adding my name as the copyright, and that's fine. I could do some adjustments as they come in. I could add a style or a preset. In other words, styles are pretty much presets, but I'm not going to do that either, so we're not going to do any of that. And this would give me file info as I click on individual images, but that's okay. So I think that's fine. I just want to import these 14 images to that folder, and I'm just going to click Import All. And by the way, I should, at the bottom, I have the option to eject the SD card. I'll do that. And I could erase the images after copying. I never do that. I like to leave them on the SD card until I have them safely on my computer and backed up on my computer. So I won't do that either. So we're just going to click Import All. And what it will do, now it will import those images and it will generate previews for those images as we go. And once that's done, I'll let it do the preview thing, and we'll take a little bit of a tour around the workspace of Capture One. Along the left, we have all the tools and the tabs. The tools are all divided up into tabs. And at the far left, we have the library tab. That's the one we were in. And in the library tab, we could manage our images and filter our images, give them star ratings and color labels. Let me just click on an image so we have something in the middle here. And we could do that all under this library tab. Next to library tab is the camera tab, and that's for tethered workflows. So if you're ever shooting tethered, you do all your adjustments and controls for the tethering under this tab. Next to that is the lens tab. That's cropping, rotation, and lens correction tools are all found here. Next to that is the color tab. Here you'll find tools for adjusting colors, correcting white balance, adjusting and adjustments for black and white images are all found here. Next to that is the exposure tab. This is the one where I spend the most time usually. This is tools for adjusting exposure, contrast, and brightness. Next to that is the details tab. That's sharpening and noise reduction. Next to that is the adjustments tab, it's called, and this is where our presets and styles are. So if you want to apply a style to the image, you would do it here. Next to that, this little I is the metadata tab, and here are metadata keywords and annotations are all done here. Next to that, this little gear is the output tab. So they call it recipes when you're creating an output file. So you're done processing and you want to maybe share the image online or maybe print it or send it to a lab. You would create an output or an export process recipe here to do that. And then finally, in the very last tab is the batch tab. That's where we, if we're batch processing images, they're done here. And the history of our batch processing is shown here. As you can see, I don't do any batch processing. At least I haven't as now. So typically, we get these images in here. And we're in the library module. And we could go through them. On the right is the browser. This is similar to the film strip in Lightroom. Of course, in Lightroom, the film strip's found at the bottom. Here it's found in the far right. And I often close this down once I decide an image I want to work on. So I'd like to just tell you a quick keyboard shortcut. If you want to get rid of the browser, if you have a Mac, hit Command B as in browser. Windows computer, Control B as in browser. And you could get rid of that. And it just gives you a little more room and a less cluttered workspace. When you want to bring it back, hit Command or Control B again to bring it back. So you could come through here and you could browse your images. And let's say you know this is one I want to process in the future. You could come up with a rating like, okay, 2-star images are, oops, that's filtering, I should say. But if you want to, let me go back to that image. I'm sorry. If you want to give it a star rating right here at the bottom of the browser, you could give it a 2-star rating. Then when you come over here, you could browse your images and you could see, click there, and we have that one showing. So you could come in and quickly give it a color label as well. You could click right here and give it a color label. But let's say, you know, I'm going through and 2-star means I'm going to be processing these in the future. So I could click on view them there and give it like 2-star ratings and so on. You could see, and that one I'd like to process and so on. So you could go through the browser. Now, one I think I actually want to work on for this demonstration is this one. Now it's black and white. I actually had my camera set to black and white, but I did shoot raw. Because it's a raw file, it really is the actual raw file. It's not just black and white. So I could put this back to color, and I'd really like to process this in color. So this is the image I've decided to work on, and I'm going to close the browser by hitting Command B. Of course, that's because I have a Mac. If you have a PC, it's Control B. And what we're going to do now is, first of all, get this back to color. I very rarely probably will you have to deal with this. If you're used to doing this in Lightroom, if you shoot raw you have your camera set to black and white though, but you're shooting raw, you'll notice when you import into Lightroom, they're all color. Your raw files are always color. It's not that way with Capture One. It's honoring your in-camera choice of black and white and showing you black and white. So what you need to do is you need to go to the color tab, and you need to go to base characteristics, and you'll see right here curve, it says auto. Click on that and you can see that all the in-camera Fujifilm camera profiles are there. And the standard profile is Pro Via. So I'm just going to pick that, and you can see we're back in color now. So that's an advantage I think Capture One has. It honors your in-camera choice, unlike Lightroom. Lightroom's just going to bring that in at the standard Pro Via profile and going to show you it in color. And if you really did want to shoot in black and white, this is probably most relevant maybe to street photographers, and you're shooting in black and white with a very specific black and white camera profile. When you import your images into Capture One, it's going to honor that. So you'll see black and white, and you could just process from that point forward and save you some time. So we have the image in. Now I've put it back to color, and I'm just going to process it. And I'm going to start with the exposure tab. These are the tools that are most often used to adjust the tone and exposure of the image. One thing I should add is you could customize everything, and in future videos I will demonstrate how you could customize these tabs. You could even create a new tab with the adjustments that you most often use, all located in that one tab. So you could really streamline the experience of working in Capture One. So I'm going to adjust the exposure and tone of the image, and this is a totally unprocessed raw file. And so as I look at the image, I kind of look at it first and see what does it need. Well, the shadows are a little dark, and I'm going to jump right down probably the dynamic range just to open up the shadows a bit, and you can see how that opens up the shadows. And then the highlights will rein in the highlights. So if I push this to the right, you'll see the sky is getting a little darker. So I'm just going to balance this out a little bit. And actually, exposure and brightness are okay. I really don't have to adjust those. And the difference between exposure and brightness is exposure will brighten every single pixel of the image, whereas brightness tends to affect the midtones more so. So if you have an image that really has muddy midtones, brightness might be a better choice to bring up the midtones, and it won't affect the highlights and shadows as much. Now I am going to add some contrast, and I am going to add some saturation. And you can see now I've really just moved 4 sliders. And if you want to see like a before after, hold the Alt or Option key, and it's Alt if you have a Mac, Option if you have a PC, and then click on this arrow right here and hold your left mouse button in. There's before, our black and white image, and there's after. So you could see I really didn't do a lot, and I've really adjusted it quite a bit. Now one thing I like to do is I like to use levels. So I'm going to jump down to levels, and I could get an auto level reading by just clicking this A button there, and you could see it automatically adjust levels. I'm going to undo that by hitting Command Z. If you have a PC, it's Control Z. I like to do it manually usually, so I usually go over the highlight side. The levels are divided up with shadows on the far left, midtones in the middle, and highlights at the far right. And I just drag this bottom, and you can see it's going to adjust the whites brighter. And I could bring it right to this edge here. You can see I'm probably clipping the blue channel a little bit. That's okay. I kind of like it right there. And then similarly for shadows, I go over to the shadow side and I'll move that to the right a little bit. And I tend to like that. Now, if I want to see what I'm clipping, if I go up here to this triangle with the exclamation point in the middle and click on that, that's my clipping indicators. You could see red is where I'm clipping highlights and blue is where I'm clipping shadows. So I could kind of pull this back a little bit because I don't usually like to clip highlights that much or at all. But I'm going to leave it right there. I think that looks pretty good. And I like to clip the shadows a little bit. For my style of processing, I like doing that because I feel it gives my images more tonal depth. I have absolute black in the image all the way through to almost absolute white. And in this case, I have absolute white. So I think that's a pretty good adjustment right there. So I'm going to turn the clipping indicators off by clicking on that triangle again. So I like that. I'm not going to do anything with curves in this image. I added contrast up here, so I'm not going to do it there. Now we have clarity and structure, and I like using the natural method. You can see there's natural, punch, and classic, and neutral. I'm going to stay with natural. And clarity is mid-tone contrast. Unlike the contrast slider, which makes the highlights brighter and the shadows darker, clarity affects the midtones and affects contrast in the midtone. So I'm going to move that up a little bit. And structure gives you edge sharpness. So I'm going to move that to the right just a little bit as well. Now, as I gaze at my image, it still looks like the buildings are a little dark to me. So I'm going to go to the shadows and I'm going to open those up a touch more. Make those a little brighter. All right, now vignetting, I like doing that at the very end, and I'm not going to do that quite yet. So I kind of like it so far. I like what we've done. So I'm going to go over to the color tab, and I'm going to, I think white balance is fine, but I'm going to go right to the color editor. Now I could adjust very specific colors by clicking on this wheel or by choosing the colors down here. Or another method, and one method I like to use, is you click this little eyedropper here. It's called Pick Basic Color Correction. It's kind of like a very specific way to pick the color you want to affect. So it's like a targeted adjustment. And I want to adjust this blue sky. So I'm going to click right there. And you can see that the color wheel now goes right to that color area where I clicked. And I want to take lightness down. So you can see if I go, it's making the sky darker. Or if I go to the right, it's making the sky brighter. And I want to make the sky darker, and I want to bring saturation up just a touch. Not that much. Just a little bit. So I want to keep that tool active, and I want to adjust the lighter grass. And I'm going to click on the grass right there. You can see it pick that color range, and I'm going to make that brighter. Just gives me a little more color range, I think, in my image, so I kind of like that. And when I'm done with this tool, up at the top is the tool well and cursor well. And you could come in and just go to the hand tool. And the hand tool by default is what you usually will have on here. You could drag the image around, or if you double click on the image, you could zoom in, double click again to zoom out. Next, I'm going to go over to the detail tab, and I'm going to double click to zoom in. Look at the sky here, and there's really no noise at all. There isn't any noise. I shot this obviously at a lower ISO, and the Fujifilm X-T3 really has excellent noise reduction and high noise ISO performance. So I'm going to go right to sharpening, and I'm going to turn sharpening up quite a bit, actually more than I usually do. And I think that's fine just the way it is. And then one thing I just want to go real quick to the lens tab. And I wanted to show you the, purple fringing. If you had fringing, you would zoom in. You could get rid of it there. I don't have that here. You could rotate and flip. Cropping, you could do here also the crop tools up here in the tool well in the top area. So you could crop. I didn't need to crop this image. You could choose the grid you use when you crop. Rule of thirds, a golden ratio, Fibonacci spiral. So we'll leave that. Keystoning. This image is leaning back a little bit because I tilted my camera up and I used, I think, a 16mm lens. So I'm going to go to the vertical slider and I'm just going to move this the other way, actually. You can see how it straightens out those buildings. It takes a second to render, so you got to kind of be patient with this adjustment. I think that's pretty good right there. So we're going to leave that right like that. So we're good to go right there. So I think I'm going to just finish it off. I'll go to the exposure tab, and I'm going to go down to vignetting, and I'm just going to put a darker vignette on it. I like to put a darker vignette on images usually. It just slightly, it helps draw the viewer's attention more towards the middle. So let's see a before after. I'm going to hold that Alt or Option key again. It's Alt if you have a PC, Option if you have a Mac. Click on this backward arrow right there. Hold in the left mouse button. There's my color or my black and white image. And there's after. And you can see that pretty dramatic change and processing done to the shot. So that's my quick start. Now, I didn't touch on a lot of things. We didn't even talk about layers or any of the tools that we could use within layers. In future videos, I'll start talking about those, and we'll learn how to remove sensor spots, remove objects from an image, affect various parts of the image, maybe do dodging and burning in very specific areas of an image, and we'll do that in future videos. But for most of you, I think this quick start video will really help you get going and learn how to use Capture One. Thank you, everyone that watches my videos. I truly do appreciate it. I'll talk to you guys soon.